Thank you, thank you, thank you. So, thank you for joining. My name is Clara Perez, and I'm a Salesforce MVP and Salesforce developer. I've been a Salesforce developer for 6 years now, and I love being one Salesforce developer. The thing that I like the most about the platform is that I can wake up at 8 in the morning, and by 5, when I'm done with work, I know that I was able to push something to production because the platform is so easy that lets you start a project one day, and at the end of that same day, it lets you push that into a live environment where your users can actually use it. You can follow me on Twitter at Clapper87, and we can engage in social media interaction. You probably have seen this slide before. This is the famous safe harbor statement, which basically says, do not make any purchasing decision based on any forward-looking statement. I'm not going to be making any forward-looking statement. We are going to talk about what is available in the platform right now for you. But just in case, if I made one statement, one forward-looking statement, just don't make any purchasing decisions on that. Also, don't forget to follow Salesforce in all their social channels. And as Annie says, this webinar is being recorded. And if you have any questions, please log it either in the chat or in the forums. Okay, so the Salesforce App Cloud, what is it? Well, the Salesforce App Cloud is a unified platform that is built for your success. It's going to help you design and develop cloud applications faster than ever. And it's going to provide you all of the tools you need, not only to create amazing stuff, but also to learn new things in a fun way using Trailhead. So we have Force.com, we have the Heroku Enterprise, we have the App Exchange, which is very similar to the, for example, Apple Store, where you have apps and you can install that into your environment orgs. You have Lightning to develop visual pages and visual experiences that are easy to do and amazing to use. And also you have Thunder, which is a stream event base that you can use on your mobile phones. And one of the cool things I like about Salesforce is Trailhead. That's the #1 resource if you want to learn something new. If you're new on the platform and you actually don't know where to start, I would recommend you to start with Trailhead. Okay, so talking about the Sales App Cloud or the Force.com App Cloud, we have 4 main types of app commonly built on the platform. The first are applications that automate critical business process. This is basically getting rid of all of those spreadsheets and Lotus notes and connecting your data together in a way that is easy to locate and is useful for your business. The second major use case is what we call social end-front. Social front-ends are applications that extends the value of a legacy data system or a system such as an ERP or a data warehouse. This type of application helps companies maximize their investments from their legacy apps. We also have customers that can create social websites, and those websites are connected with their data to maximize marketing and brand exposure. And finally, we have customer social engagements, and those are applications you build on the platform to connect with your customer through social medias. Out of the box, Salesforce is going to provide you multiple tools to build those type of applications. And when we say out of the box, we're talking about a point-and-click approach to build this functionality. For example, we have ways where you can build your model, which are your objects, or where you store data in the database. We also have flows, process builder, and analytic functionality embedded into Salesforce. Out of the box, Salesforce is also going to provide you multiple tools that you can use to build your applications in a point-and-click fashion. For example, you have form builders, you have portals, you have sites. You also have workflow rules and many other functionality that just with your mouth and with your mouse and keyboard, you can go ahead and create amazing apps. We also have, as I said before, analytics that allows you to get the big picture of your data inside of Salesforce. And if you want to learn more about these point-and-click tools, there's a batch called Salesforce Platform Basics, and I highly recommend this batch if you're new to Salesforce. That way you can learn how to customize Salesforce without the need of knowing code. Okay, so we have the platform, Salesforce. Now, there's two ways of developing in the platform. Both of those ways are great. And depending on your need, you're going to choose to use one or another to accomplish your goal. You have the declarative way, which is on the left. The declarative way is a point-and-click approach that lets you configure and create apps via the Salesforce UI or user interface. The cool thing about this approach is that you do not need to know anything about code. You do not need to know programming or anything like that to master building applications in the cloud. It is also faster to build point-and-click application, and in here you can see a couple of the components that you use to develop this way. So for example, you have page layouts, you have record types, you can create formula fields or validation rule to prevent users from inputting invalid information in your Salesforce. You also have workflow rules and approvals that are part of the automation features of Salesforce. And of course, you can create custom objects, custom fields. This is where you store the information. We call them objects. And inside the fields is the actual data that you put into the object. We're going to take a more, to actually see examples of this. And also, as well, you can create relationship between objects. Now, the programmatic approach, on the other hand, is more powerful and customizable. Here is where you actually will need to learn or have some coding skill, but it's totally worth it. We will look at more details of each components used here, like Visualforce pages, Apex controllers and triggers, and some of the APIs. I don't know if you can tell from this slide, but both the programmatic and declarative approach are based on the MVC pattern, which stands for model, view, and controller. And it's a way to segment your application development. In the MVC pattern, the model is everything related to your data. So the model will be your custom objects, your fields, and the relationship among them. The view is very similar to the presentation layer. This is how you display the data you have as valuable information to your employees and clients. For example, page layout, record types, Visualforce pages are part of the view. And finally, you have the controller, which is what connects everything together. These are classes, these are triggers, and those are the files we write to fetch and manipulate data. These classes and triggers are written in a language that is called Apex. What is Apex exactly? Well, Apex is Salesforce's own programming language. That means that Salesforce created Apex specifically to develop things in the platform. Apex is very similar to Java, but it also has a few good differences. For example, Apex is cloud-based, so you are not going to need a compiler. Apex is case insensitive. Apex is already aware of your database, so you are not going to need a connection between the database and the code you write. And it also requires unit testing. We're going to talk a little bit more about all of these topics in a few minutes. One of the most remarkable differences, and this is probably the difference that is going to get you into trouble if you do not know it or if you do not learn how to use it to your benefit, is that the platform enforces governor limits. And these limits are the ones you need to respect in order for your code and your applications not to crash. One of the common ways to use Apex classes and Visualforce pages are in the form of controllers. Controllers are basically the brain of your Visualforce pages. And as I said before, inside the controllers, you can fetch data and define the behaviors of interaction between the page and the user. So basically, what happens when in this view, for example, what happens when the user presses the retrieve contact button is going to call the Apex controller to actually get the information the user is looking for. In this slide, we are seeing one of my favorite development tools, and it's called the development mode. And it's going to allow you to split your screen in two ways. The first one is going to show you what the user is actually going to see, the Visualforce page itself. And below that, you're going to be able to see the code. There are other ways of how to develop code. One of them is the developer console. You also have the browser inline edit, which is the one that we're seeing right now. And we also have IDEs like the Force.com, Eclipse, or Maven Mates. Let me actually go ahead and quick show you or demo how I usually write code in the platform. Okay, so hopefully you see my Salesforce environment. Right now I'm logged into my developer environment. And from here, the first way I'm going to show you is how to use the developer console. You click your name and then you click the developer console link. And it's going to load this window. And right here I have access to all of the Apex classes, trigger, Visualforce pages, all of the resources that I have created. I can open them up or I can create new ones. Right here we're seeing a Visualforce page that I'm going to demo in a few slides later. But this is one of my favorite. When I have to do changes to a class or a Visualforce page that are a little bit complex, I use the developer console. Another way to write code in your Salesforce environment is by going through setup and then actually typing in the quick find Apex classes and then clicking new. Notice that you can also open the developer console from here. So if you click new, you just can write your own classes. And the final way, and this is also one of my other favorites, is by enabling the development mode. For that, you need to go to your user, go into personal information, and then advanced user detail, edit, and select development mode. Then click save. This is one of my favorite because now I'm allowed to create Visualforce pages super fast. So for example, if I want to create a Visualforce page, I just need to type the name. I need to type /apex/demo page. And Salesforce is going to look for a Visualforce page, an existing one called demo page. But since it doesn't know of one, there's no Visualforce page that is called demo page. It's telling you, hey, I didn't find a page named demo page. Do you want to create one? And I go like, oh, yes, I want to create one. And just with a click, boom, I have my new page created. And it has a little bit of information, some standard text here. And I can see, for example, I can see the code that is needed to view this page. Let's do a quick edit. For example, I want to say hello, and let's say hello to the user that is currently logged in. And there you go. Notice that the text right here is now changed to hello Clara because I'm the user logged in. This way I love it because I am able to do an edit and quickly view the results right on the page. Okay, so we talked about a little bit how to write code and where to write it. Now let's go a bit deeper into Apex triggers. Apex triggers are also written in Apex. The one great difference between an Apex class and an Apex trigger is that triggers are DML based. This means that the only way a trigger can fire is by performing a record insert or update or delete. You can write triggers on all custom objects and most major standard objects. However, when you write a trigger, you need to keep in mind the governor limits and try to bulkify your code. Remember that a trigger can act on a single record, but it can also act on a batch of records. I'm going to show you a live example of how a trigger looks like. Before I show you the code, I'm going to show you what the triggers does. Okay, so I'm going to go to all my accounts. I'm going to select one account. And I've created this custom field called last edited by. I have already implemented a trigger that any time that I make an edit to an account, this field right here is automatically populated with the profile of who edited the account. So for example, if I go here and say, actually, the type is prospect. Notice that the last edited by field is blank. When I save this field or this account, notice how automatically the platform input a value, and the value is the profile of whoever edited the account. In this case, myself. So that's why last edited by is system administrator. This is a simple scenario, but it's one of the things we can do with Apex Trigger. Modify information before it actually hits the database. Let me show you the code behind this. Again, I'm in the developer console. The best practices we have in Salesforce, and remember, these best practices are there because we have governor limits in our environments. These best practices, some of them, I'm going to show you how to restructure this trigger to actually use best practices and have a good trigger. Okay, so let's apply best practice to this trigger. Number one, always bulkify your triggers. Remember that triggers can act on a single account, but they also can act on multiple accounts. So say, for example, you are uploading a file of accounts to your Salesforce database. The trigger or these actions are going to be collected in batches of 200 accounts per time, and that is going to be inserted or updated into your database. So one of the best practices is always to bulkify your trigger. This best practice is not being met by this trigger right here, line 14. Why? Because even though it works with one account, if I try to insert or update multiple accounts at a time, it's only going to work properly for the first account since I have the index 0 here. In order to actually bulkify this trigger, you will need to implement a for loop. And this is how we will do it. Okay, so what is this trigger that new thing here? Trigger that new is a context variable. And context variable are collections of the records that are being modified by your trigger or by your actions. And talking about actions, this right here that you see on the tops are called trigger events. And this is when we want the trigger to actually fire up. In this case, we're firing up the trigger on before insert and before update. We have other actions or other events like before update, after update, after insert, before delete. Okay? So coming back to the bulkifying part, we're doing a for loop to go over the set of records that are either being inserted or updated, and we're going to perform the logic for each account in this collection. For each account in trigger new, this code statement is going to be executed. Now, the second best practice that you need to apply is not to make SQL statements inside your for loops. So-called statements are the commands we do or we write to get things, to get data out of the database. In this case, line 12 is a so-called statement, is querying the database, specifically the profile object, to get the current profile, okay? And this inside of a trigger is a big no-no. And the reason behind that, remember, is the governor limits. We have limits that are going to make our applications crash if we do not respect them. So what we need to do is to move this so-called statement outside the for loop. Sorry about that. Out of the so-called loop. Okay? Finally, we can remove this account, this statement right here, because every time that we get an account from or trigger that new collection is going to be reflected on this variable. And then we can change the value of the last edited by to the current profile. So this is, right now, this is the same functionality we had before, but with best practices applied. I'm going to save this, and there you go. Now you have a good trigger that has best practices applied. What about best practices number 3 and number 4? Well, DML statements are the operations you make to actually commit the changes you've made to the database. One of the best practices or golden rules is not to make DML statement inside of your loops or your for loops, right? And finally, implement logic-less triggers. This is a little bit more advanced topic, but this rule says that anytime you write a trigger, you should write an action handler or a class that handles the logic of your triggers. Let me show you this example. For example, this example right here. This is one trigger that is a logic-less trigger. It's acting as a dispatch trigger. As you can see, it is going to be executing on the before insert and before update. And what we're doing is that if the trigger is the event was before insert, then call a class to execute the actual logic we want to do. And why do we do that? As your organization grows in complexity, as you have more and more business processes, you need to make sure to write code that is maintainable. There has been many occasions that I've worked with clients that have triggers that are 400, 600 lines long, and those are a nightmare. So one of the things that you can do if you want to develop code that is very maintainable is to write logic-less triggers and apply the best practices to the triggers and also the classes you're writing. Inside Apex, you also can use interfaces and annotations. We're going to take a look at one of the annotations in a later example, but some of the interfaces you can use are batchable. The batchable interface is used when you need to perform a logic in a bunch of records. Let's say you need to perform some update in 20,000 records. That's a lot of records, and it's going to perform better if you batch that logic. You can also schedule things to happen with the scheduled interface. You have an email interface that allows you to write custom emails and send them out to your customers, clients, your users from inside Salesforce to their email service providers. And we also have REST services on which you can create them. You can create custom REST services, but you also have out-of-the-box REST services available to you. Okay, so we know that we can write triggers. We know that we can write code. That's great. One of the biggest difference between Salesforce and writing code in Salesforce from any other platform is that Salesforce and Apex requires you to write unit testing. Unit testing are code to test the code. And that's basically when you write your Apex trigger or classes, the next step is to develop more code to test the functionality you built actually works. And there are a couple of things that you need to have in mind when you write a test class. You need to test the positive and negative behavior. You need to test single case scenario and batch case scenario. You need to test user access with the system run as method. And you can use the add test setup annotation to create your data. One of the things that you can also use is the test.start test and test.stop test method to refresh your limits. And finally, you need to remember to always include assertions on your test methods. This is not only about unit testing. Is not only about code coverage, but it's also about making sure your code works as expected. So including assertions on your test methods, it's how you do that, how you ensure the code is actually working. I know that that's a lot of words, so let me actually show you an example. Okay, again, in my developer console, we have the trigger we created a couple minutes ago. And if you notice right here, you have a code coverage dropdown. Right now, you have zero code coverage. We need to write a test class to get this trigger covered. Fortunately, I have already written the class, and I'm going to show you how it looks. Okay, the first things, annotations. The first annotation we see here is the add is test. This is how the platform knows that this is not a regular class, it's a test class that is going to test functionality from another class or a trigger. The second annotation, add test setup. This is one of my favorite annotations of all because it allows you to create test data. When you run a test, all of the data in your Salesforce environment is not available for default to your test methods. So you actually need to create your records in order to use them. Right here, I'm using the test setup annotation to create an account and a new user. And this right here is a test method. Notice that we have the word or the keyword test method on the declaration of the function itself. This particular test is verifying that anytime an account is inserted, the last edited by field grabs the correct value. Okay, so very simple. The first thing that I like to do is just to do an assert, making sure that I have data in my database. Next, I'm going to create a new account. I'm instantiating a new account in memory, and then I'm going to insert this account. The moment that the insert DML statement executes, my trigger that I created previously is going to run, grab the profile of whoever created the account, and put it in the last edited by field. And in order for me to ensure that my code is working, this is why I have to do the assert. So basically I'm doing, okay, I want to make sure that a new account was inserted. And I also want to make sure that the last edited by field was populated with the system admin because I was the user who created the account on this test. One of the things that I like to do when I'm writing test classes, and it's also a best practice, is to name your test in a very descriptive way. Something that at a glance I can tell what this method is testing and whether it's a positive or negative test. A second test is right here. This, as you can tell from the name of the method, is going to test updates to the account. And for this one, I'm using a cool statement called run as. The run as statement allows you to perform an action pretending you are another user. And this statement, the run as statement, can only be used in test methods or test classes. And as you can see from this small test, what I'm doing is just getting an account from the database, and then pretending I'm another user who has the standard user profile, doing an update, basically changing the type field, performing the update, and at this point, my trigger is going to run, do the functionality we tell them to do, and after the test is done, the last modified by field should have the standard user instead of the system admin wording on the last edited by. I'm going to go ahead and run the test. As you can see, there's a beautiful button here. The test is being run, and I can tap in the test tab and see how my test went or how did it run. And as you can see, all of the test method passed correctly. And one of the cool things that I like about Salesforce is that now I can actually see that my code coverage for my trigger is 100%. If I had lines that are not covered, it would show in blue. Excuse me, it would show in red. Since all of the lines executed by my tests are covered, now they're shown in blue. Okay, so when writing a test class, remember, test the positive and negative behavior. Test single and bash scenarios. You could use and you should use the system that run as user to test access. You can use the test setup annotation to create your data once, and that data is going to be available to all of your test method. And you can use the a start test and a stop test. What this does is it's going to give you a fresh set of governor limits to perform your actual tests inside of your test method. And finally, do not ever forget this one. Always include assertions. Assertions are your friends. Assertions is what are going to let you know if your code is working. And something else, remember that Salesforce has 3 releases per year. One of the things that Salesforce do before releasing something is to run all of your tests in your environment to make sure that nothing breaks because of the release. So if you do not include assertions, Salesforce is not going to be able to recognize if they did break something. So always include assertion in your code. Okay, you created code, you created a trigger, you created a Visualforce page with a controller. How do you push that into your live environment? Well, in order to deploy your code to production, the first thing you have to have is 75% of overall code for production. So this means that if your production environment is below 75% on code coverage, you're not going to be able to deploy new features into your org. One of the things we like to do at Greyway is to ensure that all of our classes are 90% or up in code coverage. And that's something that I would encourage you to also embrace. Apex and triggers can be only developed in sandboxes or developer editions. You are not going to be able to write an Apex class or an Apex trigger in your environment, in your production org. To migrate the changes, you can use either the Force.com migration tool, you can use the Force.com client interface, you can use also the plugin, or you can use change sets to move the changes you made from your sandbox to your production environment. If you want to learn more about Apex and database, go to Trailhead. Go there and search for the Apex and database badge. That is a great way to start learning about Apex and how to access your data in Salesforce. Okay, so we've talked about Salesforce, we talked about triggers, Apex. What about Visualforce? Well, in the next minutes, I'm going to talk briefly about Visualforce and what you can do with it, where you can use it. Visualforce is a powerful tag, and it's a tag syntax very similar to HTML, but it allows the developer to create pages faster. You can create pages that are visible only to your users, or you can expose them to your clients too. One of the benefits of Visualforce is that you can leverage other technology like HTML, CSS, JavaScript, Bootstrap, and so many other to make your page fancier, more responsive, and overall more beautiful, or to get that custom look and feel that you want. Visualforce is a framework to build custom user interfaces. It's hosted on theforce.com, and one of the things that I love about it is that you can create complex pages very fast. Visualforce is the perfect example of the MVC. Okay, so in a Visualforce, you can quickly, at a glance, take a look at how the MVC comes together. For example, the view is going to be represented by the Visualforce tag, for example, apex.input field. The controller is the variables you declare in your extension, in your Apex classes, to access that information, and then the model is your actual object. Visualforce gives you a bunch of tags. Visualforce has more than 100, more than probably 300 standard components and tags you can use right out of the box. And you can also use CSS, JavaScript, Flash, and any other web-enabled code to enhance the view and the look of your pages. You remember that in one of the examples previously, we created a Visualforce page, and it was pretty much effortless. And I'm going to show you a more advanced Visualforce page in the next slide. But before I do that, let me give you a little bit of more information of what do you use when you're building a Visualforce page. Inside of Visualforce, we use expressions. And expressions or merge fields are basically placeholders for your data. We can also use global variables, which allows the developer to be aware of the system resources. So if you remember on the example, I use exclamation, $ user. That's a global variable. Anything that has $ is considered in front is considered a global variable and is accessing the system resources. So expression can either have dynamic variables, they can also have functions inside of it, or they can do logic. And here's how a component looks like when there is an expression involved and a Visualforce tag. Right here we have an Apex output field tag. This is the kind of the anatomy of the component. All the standard components starts with the Apex or chatter prefix followed by the value attribute, which is which then uses a merge field or a global variable to present a value. The cool thing about Visualforce component is that there are plenty of them, and you can use them according to your need. My two favorite components are the output field and the input field because they are aware of the data type you're trying to display. Salesforce also lets you create your own custom components and define the attributes you like to use in them. In this view, in this scenario, we're basically gaining access to an address field we created on an object called restaurant. Let me go ahead and show you an example. This is a small Visualforce page I created. It's very simple. It just goes to an account and uses this drop-down to filter the contacts associated to this account by role. So for example, let's say I want to know who are the decision makers contacts of this account, I just click it, and in a couple of seconds, I can see that Jack Rogers and Janet Black are contacts with the decision maker role. If I want to see the HR person, I see that Britney Spears is the HR for this company. Look at how simple it was to create this page, this Visualforce page. I just have a block that displays the account information. So, for example, I can access the account name, and it's displayed right here. Notice that we're using a standard HTML and a standard Visualforce tag called Apex Output Field. With the same tag, I'm also displaying an account number that you can see right here. And with the same tag, and this is why it's one of my favorite, we're also displaying the phone. And as you can notice, all of these fields right here, they have different formats. We have text, we have phone number, we have websites, and everything is beautifully formatted for the view. And this is why that's one of my favorite tags to use, because it is content aware. On the other section, I have a drop-down right here. And again, this time I'm using an input field. And the only thing I need to do is pass the value, and it's going to display as a pick list right here. And then right here I have an action support, that is what gets executed every time I change the drop-down. It executes the action and re-renders the table that I have right here. So this is the table that is showing two columns, the name and the role, and you can see it right here. Every time I change the role, the table refreshes, and it's pretty simple. Now this is the view, right? This is how everything looks to the user. But what about the brains? What is the Apex class or Apex extension that I'm using to actually search the information in my database? I think you can pretty much see it, right? The extension attribute of the Apex page tag allows me to link a Visualforce page with an existing Apex controller or an Apex class. And this is the simple controller I created, less than 25 lines of code. In these 25 lines of code, I'm defining my variables, I'm instantiating my variables, and then I'm performing a search. And as you can see, this is a SQL statement that is grabbing me the specified role for a specific account. So let's talk a little bit the Apex controllers or Visualforce controllers. They're written in Apex. They provide access to your data. They handle the interaction with the UI. So any push of the buttons, any drop-down changes in an input field, that's what the controller handles. You have two types of controllers. You have the standard controllers that gives you access by default to the save, delete, clone operations of Salesforce. And you can have custom controllers. Custom controllers are the ones that you as a developer write to have functionality to extend the behavior of Salesforce. Okay. We also have controller extensions, and that was what I was demoing before. You can combine either a standard controller or a custom controller with extension to extend the behavior of the functionality. Here's how I connect the controller. In the Apex page tag, I need to either use the standard controller or controller attribute and put in the name of an object or an Apex class. And then you can use the extension attribute to specify multiple Apex classes to extend the functionality of your Visualforce page. So where can you use Visualforce? Visualforce can be used in so many ways inside of Salesforce and outside of Salesforce. You can use Visualforce pages in email templates. You can embed it in page layout. You can create PDF and download it to a PDF or attach a PDF to one of your records by using Visualforce. You can use them also in custom tabs, mobile interfaces, and you can do pages override. One of the things you can also do with Visualforce is to create buttons. And actually, let me just go ahead and show you how to do that. Okay, so cool. I have this amazing page that is a filter for my contacts, but how do I access this page? One of the things you can do is just go to your account object and create a custom button. So notice this shortcut that I did. I went to the account tab, I open up this menu, and I went to the object, okay? Now I can scroll down and say, I want to create a custom button, and I'm going to name it Filter Contacts, okay? And display it as a detail page button. And here, instead of saying content source, I'm going to select Visualforce page, and right here I have the page I previously created, Filter Contacts. And I'm going to say quick save. I'm going to go back to my account menu, and I'm going to modify the page layout to add the button I just created to my account. And let me actually show you, right? So right here, the only buttons we have are edit, delete, and include offline. Now I'm going to add the new button right here. I'm going to add it, and I'm going to save it. And I'll refresh this, and right here is my button that I just created. Now, when I click this button, it's going to launch my wizard or my searching functionality, and now I can easily see, oh, who's the decision maker? Awesome, great. And then I can just close. Whenever I'm happy with my results, I can close it up, and I can be at my account again, instead of having to wander through the related list and see. We can also embed Visualforce inside of this view, and we can also use them for mobile devices and email templates. Again, Trailhead, if you want to learn more about Visualforce, go there and earn the Visualforce Basic Badge. That's an awesome badge to earn, one of my favorites probably. And just be sure to check out all of the content in Salesforce in Trailhead to make sure your learning journey is as fun and as amazing it can be. With that, let's go over to the questions.
Yeah, so thank you, Clara, for the lovely presentation. And so we're going to go into Q&A now. Looks like we have around 5 minutes. And as mentioned before, I've been tracking your questions, and I'll be asking Clara one by one. And the first question is, for the drag and drop option code, can the code be viewed by the user? And if yes, can it be edited?
Good question. And if I understand the question correctly, by drag and drop, I assuming that you are saying the development mode. So the view that it was splitted, the screen was splitted. And the answer is no. Only developers can see this mode, okay? In order to actually view code, you need to have the author apex checkbox on your profile.
So this is coming from someone who wants to become a developer from being an admin. And as someone who only has some HTML and CSS knowledge, what would be a great way to start learning Apex?
That's perfect. I think HTML and CSS knowledge is everything you need. And Trailhead, of course. Go to Trailhead and find the developer. You can just type it in. Find the developer basic badges and start learning from there. And let me tell you, when I first started on Salesforce, I knew zero about Apex, zero about triggers, zero about anything of Salesforce. I started from scratch. And one of the things, at that time, we didn't have Trailhead, but we have an amazing community. And the community is like 24/7 there to help you. So go ahead. First stop is going to be Trailhead for you. Second stop is going to be the forums and the community.
Awesome. Thank you. And the next question, do we require to write test classes for the triggers which we write?
Are you required? Yes. All triggers must have at least one line of code executed by a test method. Okay?
And so the next question, so does Force.com support code versioning, especially with multiple developers working on the same page?
Good question. As of now, out of the box, no. Salesforce does not support versioning. You'll have to integrate probably with GitHub, SVN, or some other SVN platform. That's one of the things that is kind of a headache when you have one developer working, you have multiple developers working on a single page. What I recommend is to use the Force.com IDE, Eclipse, or Maven's Mate. That's going to make it a little bit easier. But as of now, we do not have support for multiple developers on a single page.
Thank you. And another more technical question. So if this person is a government developer and have developed apps for different departments, and this person wants to know if there is any way to separate two department client tables under the same Salesforce org. So for example, under client, one department has first name, last name fields, but another department client has no first and last name fields, but has a different information fields listed instead. So is there a way to separate these two tables under the same org? I believe...
Oh, sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. So yes, the answer is yes. You're still going to have the account object, okay? But you can use record types to do the separations of business, right? You can have one record type for the type A of account and a second record type for type B. And with record types, you are able to display not only different fields on the layout, but also different values inside of a pick list, okay?
Can we do Visualforce development in Visual Studio instead of Eclipse?
I do not have an answer for that. I would have to search, see if that's available.
Great. And just trying to get a few more questions in before we end the webinar. Next one is, what are the differences between writing code in Developer Console and in Force.com IDE?
The one difference that there are multiples. On the Force.com IDE, you're probably going to have field completion. And the major difference that you're going to have is that there is a bigger lag of time, a bigger delay when you save the changes. When you save, you have to sync to Salesforce, and that might take a little bit longer. That's one of the differences. But one of the advantages is that you can develop offline. So you don't have a connection, but you have your Apex class. You can start making the changes offline using the Force.com IDE. You can start making the changes offline, and then when you're ready to upload your changes or you have connection, then you can upload the changes. In the developer console, you are always going to have need to have an internet connection because it's on the cloud.
Perfect. And our last question, and of course, for our audience, feel free to please post these questions on our forum, and we'll definitely be able to answer those for you. And with that said, the last one, how can we create a pick list field dependence in Visualforce?
Very good question. One way to do it is to use the Apex input field and so you have two pick lists. One is dependent on another. If you put both fields in the Visualforce page, using the Apex input field is going to grab the dependency. So no, you don't have to do anything else. But if you have not defined a field dependency in your data model, then you have to use code to actually do it. And the code is a little bit complex, but there are definitely a lot of examples out there. So you just have to type in Google, for example, Apex picklist dependency, and you're going to get a lot of good results on that.
Perfect. And with that, that concludes today's Force.com Friday webinar. Thank you everyone for joining us today. And like I said before, if we did not get to your specific questions, please reach out to us via our forum and our social media platforms. And I hope everyone has a great weekend, and we'll see you next time. Thank you so much.